Yeah, you don't
I'm
mind.
with I'm with you, Chris. I have experienced the same things. I mean, we have the same groups of students. It's kind of fun though, using that gas method and the fact that they've used it so many times that they come in and they run it themselves. Once by their fourth quarter, they're walking into the debrief room and they're like, I'd like to start with, and I don't even say anything. It's kind of nice in the beginning there, and then when they're quiet, um, we can go on. But I do like that we have that organization and they know what to expect.
Nicola, your hands up. Are you back?
Sorry,
Oh,
I'm the
sorry.
only I'm the only one here on man in the doorbell as it goes off. So I don't mean to keep running off. I have to say this was pretty powerful because we see like a cohort the entire time of their program, and we're the only ones that are simming. And like when we have, there are some cohorts that really kind of stretch your abilities to really kind of maintain focus. And I have noticed that we fall into that bias. Like we've seen them, it did not go well at the very beginning of their program. We're like graying in the control room as we're assessing the heart on the right side, and then shaking it off to like see them as like brand new individuals like 6 weeks later or as the program continues, I think has been challenging, and really speaks to like stick with that format, like stick with we use pearls, we need to stick with that, and kind of accept like if we truly believe everybody is intelligent and wants to do a great job, like let's truly lean into everybody's intelligent and wants to do a good job. We also have stopped communication from clinical faculty. So unless it's a formal remediation that we're going to be doing with the student, emailing me to tell me about 4 students that are performing poorly in clinical is not actually as helpful as I think some people think, because they're working within a team for a simulation, and it kind of starts to prejudice, I've noticed, us into like looking for these clinical concerns that have been shared with us. So we've just said, like, if you're notifying us about a clinical concern, it's got to be part of a more formal remediation process where you actually want us to do something about it. Otherwise, all we're doing is kind of sitting back in the midst of a high fidelity scenario, looking for a behavior that may or may not happen. And it's changing how we're viewing like what happens in our debrief and the feedback or reflection that that particular student has. So I'm like, unless you're truly notifying us, we want to meet the student where they are on that particular day in this particular simulation, rather than like walking into that sim expecting like, oh, great, these are the weaker students we got an email about because of performance. Like unless it's actually a formalized process, we don't see them in clinical. We don't know. It changes the perception we have, and I have noticed it in myself that I'm like waiting for something to go wrong, because of an email that I've received about a clinical concern that's actually not going to be addressed by us. It's not being sent to us for remediation. It's just a FYI. So we were kind of like, we appreciate it, but like we'll kind of navigate through what we see together as a team in the setting in which we find ourselves today, rather than wait for something to happen that you may have noticed in a clinical component, unless it's formalized. Because we do have a formalized remediation component where if you see a clinical gap, you send it to us and we'll work on that specific gap. So this is I felt like a really timely article for us as we kind of navigated through a difficult cohort over the last like year, that we've started to kind of see them come in, and you can see everybody's approach a little bit different because of it. So I thought it was truly a helpful article.
That's really interesting that you bring that up because they're I'm seeing like two different kind of models of how we staff simulation, right? So you have a standalone simulation staff and the students come in and out, where our model is our clinical instructors are doing the sim, right? So the whole option for bias could be dramatically different. If I'm with somebody for the whole course and I'm also there for sim, then I remember what they did yesterday when I was visiting them and wherever they were, right?
Yeah, and I remember them from the quarter before when I was like, well, we're not going to do that today, but I also need to know like different situations, different circumstances. I got to leave it where it is, unpack it in the debrief and move on.
I think that's super interesting to hear about too, because we are just starting to talk about increasing the communication between our clinical faculty and our sim faculty, because we haven't had much communication, and essentially it is one course. So they do like maybe 10 hours of sim of their 66 hours of clinical, and then they do, you know, whatever it is, 56 hours of clinical. And there hasn't been a lot of communication, so they don't have a good time in sim, or they don't perform well in sim, or whatever you want to call it, and there's no remediation, and then we don't talk to the clinical people, and we're trying to figure out how to close that gap. But you're making me think I need to put some policies or structure around that, as opposed to just saying, well, you should be communicating with your clinical faculty, because for sure there can be bias put in then.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not helpful to know when there are gaps, but in my simulation, there's very little opportunity for me to like one-on-one address this gap in a way that's clinically meaningful for like the clinical component of the course. Whereas if you're truly that concerned that you want to reach out and tell me that there's an area, then we ought to be formalizing this process and send the student for us to do remediation.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and that also holds true for other areas besides simulation itself, whether it's clinical or even didactic. Because I know I try to give kind of a heads up, you know, about certain students that are going forward to the next instructor, and I try to base it on student needs. Like this student may need extra whatever, but it is hard. Again, that bias. It is. I don't want to color the new instructor's perception of the student that they're not a good student, or that, you know, you really need to stay on top of them, or they're unsafe or anything like that. Um, but I want to give them some kind of heads up. But yeah, it's kind of a balancing act between not giving too much subjective information, like personal feelings about the student, and just their performance.
While we're on clinical simulation, bridging clinical and simulation, I think both articles are probably super helpful, even for debriefing at the end of the clinical or our intraclinical debriefings. So I definitely found both of them very, yeah, I learned new things, so it was very helpful. My question to the group is, how do you coordinate? It's a very obviously complicated process of watching them perform and taking notes, seeing what items to discuss, and still be unbiased. And with that quick thinking and slow thinking, which I think I probably am 90% quick thinking, so have to kind of watch for that. How do you balance that? How do you catch yourself from being biased or not biased? Should we have two people debriefing where the other one is actually not only participating in coordinating the discussion, but also watching over the other one? That's my question.
I think sometimes it's helpful to have two people debriefing, and I've been that second person a few times purposefully, because I will be maybe in the control room and maybe I'm running the simulation, but the faculty's there, and I see the faculty start to like seethe, and she's muttering, they know how to do this. Why aren't they doing this? And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. And you can see her just like getting angry. And I'm like, I'm going to do the debriefing for this one. You just sit here for a minute.
Are you describing me?
No, no. And after a few of those times, the faculty had some self-awareness to say, I think I'm better with students who are earlier in the program because my expectations are different. Where when they're at the end of the program, I have higher expectations for them. And if they don't meet them, I struggle. So I think it's good to have that that self-awareness as a facilitator, right? And I know, like, I've been pulled in. Like, Tammy, remember that one time you pulled me in and she's like, I need you to just be here because I don't know how to deal with this difficult issue that's come up during the debriefing, right? And I think that's a valuable tool and a valuable thing to recognize, that we should have that option. And some days I'm more resilient than other days and can hold it together.
It's almost like we would want to also record our debriefings in a way. I don't know if it's unsafe for students, but would be interesting for professional development standpoint too. It's like, hey, here was the opportunity for you to actually zap it and see what they say, and interesting.
I would love to be able to record debriefings. And I would love to have a room where it's not obtrusive, right? And even for the Naxal endorsement, they asked for a recorded debriefing, and I just flat out told them we can't do that because the only cameras we could use would be like these ones that stand on a tripod on the table in the middle of the debriefing room, right? Which I think I just told them and they accepted it, that I would see that as causing harm and making them not feel safe because they're very obviously being recorded. But I would like to be recorded.
I think so.
I really like this second article that you posted, or the second one that we went over, because I know all these people, all these learners, I know them personally. And I've had people that have come in with, especially in one of my groups that's a more my veterans to LPNs, they come in with a set of military knowledge that is not necessarily civilian knowledge, and dealing with that when they're very confident about what they've done or what they're saying, and then nodding and yes, I understand they do that at the Air Force Hospital, but that's at the hospitals that we're working in our community, that's not the way it's necessarily done. And knowing what they've learned in class, because I'm also their theory instructor, can be very frustrating when that still comes out. So and also the quiet learners, and sometimes after sim I'll have a group just kind of bombard me over the quiet people and say, I feel like they don't do anything and I'm carrying the whole sim. And I just nod and say they have their own evaluation. They are their own people. And then they're like, oh, yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. So, but it's hard sometimes to, I mean, I don't want to try to change somebody's personality. If I am who I am. I'm an entertainer. We talked about yesterday. I am who I am, and maybe you're not. And I'm not going to try to pull entertainer out of somebody who's just clearly not that, but is a quiet thinker. But I can see that they're deeply thinking.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about that article was it actually validated to me the learners I had seen. I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is not just this person, right? Who is like this today. It's like, oh, this must happen to lots of people.
AJ has her hand up.
Oh, AJ.
One of the things that I did like that they talked about are our ELL students, and also the consideration of maybe them being a little bit more quiet and a little bit more reserved, and us seeing that in a different light, and also how other students will be in a rush, be speaking quickly and wanting to take over rather than granting that student that safe space to be able to take a moment, collect themselves, and then be able to understand the information so that they can actually go and apply their thinking so we can see what's going on, how they're reacting within this simulation. So I think that's definitely something that we do need to be mindful of.
Plus, I think the other thing too, real quick, I think is when you have groups that are in a cohort like pretty much all of our nursing students travel as a cohort. And then you break them into clinical or simulation groups. I tend to notice that it's the same students every quarter in every group. Our clinical liaison kind of assigns them to different groups, and they tend to stick together a lot, which can be a good thing or a bad thing because you always have the spokesperson for the group and one that's always wanting to talk, like me. I'm very talkative. And then you have the quiet ones who are, you can see they're paying attention and their wheels are spinning, but they don't necessarily contribute verbally a lot. But when you talk to them one on one, like on the break or whatever, they'll tell you, what they valued about the experience, or that, oh, I was so nervous and now I feel better. So a lot of times you almost have to get information outside of the actual debriefing, as the day goes on with those students.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I had a couple things from questions that have come up over not the whole time, but the last little bit here. I do think like I really like the articles and that I think that they'd also be really good resources for faculty that are newer or not used to debriefing, because it can be really intimidating to do that and to try to sometimes feel like you're just trying to like pull teeth getting people to talk in simulation and that sort of thing. So I thought that was really helpful because we've had faculty over time where usually at the college I'm at, we often have two faculty. Most of the time we have two faculty for debriefing with our model. And sometimes one will have to step out and then the other faculty will be like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this. And then they're suddenly really worried about it. So I think these are good tools to be able to have for faculty to help reinforce just reinforce their own confidence and skills some. What I thought was really interesting in reading them was recognizing the students and recognizing times when I had some of these biases occurring. And a lot of the time it was kind of nice because I've been dedicated to simulation for about 3 years now. And I was able to say, oh, I know I used to do that a lot. And I had I somewhere along the way realized that that doesn't work and developed a way around it. And that I'm doing what they're suggesting now. So it's kind of nice in reinforcing that, the debriefer has been reflective over time and really trying to improve their abilities as well. And listening to students and like the group and see if what you're doing that time is working or not and why. Because in the past, it has nothing to do with us or the sim. Sometimes it's something with the whole cohort where we've said, like we've said it more nicely, but just what happened? Like what happened today? Like with this whole group, we have 10 students at a time and we run them as pairs and then we all kind of debrief together. And we're just like, what happened? It's nice that we have two faculty because we can talk to each other about it first a little bit. And we'll just be like, what? Like, I don't know. They're at the end of the program and what just happened? And it turns out they have a huge test 2 days later. So we pose it to them in a nice kind of psychologically safe manner of just, it seemed like everyone was maybe a little bit distracted today. Is there something, what did you think, what do you think about that? And they'll say, man, we have this test coming up. For like, whoa, well, okay. And all of debrief's attitude kind of changes from our perspective. So I've noticed that before, and it's helpful to have that second person to bounce off of in that way for debriefing to help set the tone if one of us is feeling a little more negatively than the other about what happened. And sometimes it's dedicated sim staff, but other times right now we're short on sim staff, so we have more of our didactic faculty kind of helping that teach the core content. And I've noticed in sim sometimes I'll ask a question and debrief and they'll just give me this look like I taught that. I told them that because it seems pretty basic, but it didn't happen in the sim, or they're not coming up with the information. And as sim faculty, because I didn't teach it, it's helpful for both of us. One, I get to know that yes, they did get taught this, and two, I can say to the didactic, to the other faculty, it takes multiple, like they heard an hour and a half lecture. There's going to be pieces that slip by. We're here to reinforce it. And that's why we're doing this. And it kind of brings that faculty member back around as well. So I think having two people is really, truly helpful and makes it more valuable because they can check each other and be reflective, but also talk to each other afterwards about it too, to gain more skill. And yeah, so I think that was everything that I had, which was a little bit, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I imagine it's hard. I don't teach theory class anymore, but when I did, and then I was doing pediatric simulation, it was like last week, you guys, last week is what I wanted to say. But I've adjusted one of my question prompts to tell me what you know about this. And then kind of collectively, they all start to slowly remember. And then that also catches the ones who are like, nope, they never taught me this. They didn't teach me this. And then if like 3 other people are like, well, yesterday in class, and they're like, oh, yeah.
That's exactly how I phrase it sometimes as well. I've developed that one, and it's really helpful because they can kind of check each other or help jog that memory in a way that makes more sense to them because they were there or they saw that video. So it is helpful.
And I get the feeling that sometimes they just want to be told again. They don't want to have to retrieve it. But we know that the retrieval actually helps make it stick. There's a book that I put on my, after reading this, that I put on my waiting list at the library called Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
What's it about? Are you going to tell us?
It's about fast thinking and slow thinking and psychology behind it and the behavioral science behind it.
Gotcha.
And how it works. Well, because I was like, I really never heard about fast thinking and slow thinking. And then this probably came from another journal club that I listened to. And the guy goes, well, this book describes it all. I'm like everybody knows this. I'm like, I don't know that.
Yeah. And then Yelena said it earlier today. So that's why I was like, is that a thing? Because I keep hearing fast thinking, slow thinking. And I heard it twice in this meeting. So,
well, it's in the abstract of the first article. That's where
oh, see, I always skip the abstract and go right into the article.
Oh, no. I go to the abstract and the conclusion, and then I read the article.
I like to see their methods and everything if they have it.
Can we talk more about methods? And
Sure.
That's where I'm at right now in school. So, and it's intimidating, but like, and I'm picking the articles for next month kind of based on that because I want to look at that. So more, but on these, let's see, what does it say on the methods? Background.
Well, I think that these articles don't have a strong method. They're more, I don't know what you would call it, like discussion, thought-provoking.
So yeah, not research. So
Correct.
yeah. So yeah, and I really enjoy both of these. I guess, what I don't want to go too far off topic here, but you guys, I'm hearing that some programs have faculty that just do simulation and then the course instructor isn't that person that facilitates.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I don't know, we have a little different model. Like we have the person who develops the sims and helps sets them up and designs them, but then the faculty still come and do, but then, the required education, and then we're just, encouraging / leading them to CHSI, so.
That's our model, Andrea.
Yeah.
Yeah, my job as the sim manager is to do the creation, make it run, make the scheduling, and then train the faculty.
Yeah.
And then we co-facilitate until the faculty have enough skills to be independent.
Yeah, it's kind of how we're, I'm CHSE certified, but very inexperienced, and my dean is very experienced, and I don't know if she has her certification or not, but she has been there with the, simulations as, the instructors do it the first couple times. So that is one of the articles for next month, like goes over cost effectiveness. And so I wonder, as we do this, how we, we're trying to be very mindful of our budget and how, we want to get accredited, but, what we do needs to be, fiscally reproducible year after year. So,
It's expensive.
yeah. So,
We couldn't justify having a separate course credit-wise. And that's how some programs do it. So is it Nicola? Do you guys, is it like a accredited course that's part of your program that's just simulation?
So interestingly enough, it initially started as like the course faculty just kind of handed us some hours out of their credits from like didactic or wherever they had it. And this is just year 2 for me. So we are only now unpacking this. So like OB would tell me, oh, you can have equivalent of 4 hours for sim, and we'll just knock it out of our orientation for our course. So now we're like standardizing everything. And with the WABON, it's actually helped us. We're going to continue to sim the number of hours that we've been simming as kind of built into the courses at this point, but it'll now be considered like a buffer for clinical replacement in case. So it used to be kind of standalone, required, coming from some magical hours bin that none of us could ever tell. We were just kind of allocated like, this course you can have 8 hours for sim, make it happen. And we were like, okay, we get to see the learners 8 hours a quarter. Now we're kind of standardizing it and saying it's working well for the learners, but like you can't just magically make up like credit hour, like with credit hours, you can't just magically assign hours each quarter. And so we've just kind of made it part of our new process that's like everybody's going to do it as a buffer to like 1-to-1 or eventually 2-to-1 simulation for clinical replacement if needed, but still an experience that falls within like clinical hours, I guess. It's still being ironed out.
Mary, what do you guys do? Because you were telling me one day about how you run a sim for a certain period of time. Is it clinical hours?
Yes, yeah. So the primary clinical faculty or if they teach theory and clinical, so they'll come over here with their students. And then I facilitate, and yeah, it is, but the other faculty is there. So we pre-brief. We run the scenario in 2 separate sim areas with the group, and then we come back and we co-debrief the 2 groups, which has worked out. It works out fine. I mean, they're doing the same scenario. It's a little different based on what, just the students. But yeah, and those hours are out of their clinical hours. So, for sure, at least each course out of a 6-quarter gets at least 16 hours of sim. And it's just part of their clinical course. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you run 2 identical scenarios. Well, they start identical.
We try to make it similar. Yes, we do. It seems to work. I mean, we collaborate on, me and the faculty, about what happened, and sometimes there's different things that happen. But for the most part, it's similar things that are happening. So it seems to work. I know, yeah, that, I mean, and no students haven't had a concern about that, right? Debriefing with the other group. I mean, we try to keep it following the Pearls model and above, just asking the leading questions, and I mean, they hear different things that happened and how the other group managed it. So I think that's kind of a bonus, a little bit in the debrief.
I could see that as being really rich. We have in one of our courses, we divide the lab in half and they do the same scenario, but in different teams. And then when we debrief together, it's
Yeah.
like, what happened with this team and what happened with this team? And they're like,
Exactly.
oh, you noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it works for us and it's been nice. That's a new model for us. It used to be that we would well, anyway, it doesn't matter what we used to do, right? We were doing different scenarios, right? The clinical faculty would do one scenario, I would do another, and we would debrief those separately with half the group. But I've just found that doing it all together, the pre-brief, the same sims, the debrief, me and that primary clinical faculty are having much more collaboration around sim and able to mentor them of much more and get more input into the scenarios from their clinical experience or how we can adjust it. You know what I'm saying? Like just get their clinical input into it too has been really great.
That could also be a cost saving strategy if you have the space to do it, because Waban says if you're going to do 1 to 2 during the whole experience, every student has to have an active nurse role, right? And so to run them through, like they're trying to cut my hours down, but I have 10 students and they're like, well, let's do a 4-hour sim. And I said, I can't do it and have everybody be in a nurse role, because we do 2 nurses at the same time, but still that's only, and the scenario and debriefing lasts about an hour. It's impossible. You have to give me 5 hours to do it. And like in reproductive health, we can add an extra nurse, but like in peds, we can't add an extra nurse really legitimately.
Yeah.
But if we could run 2 rooms at the same time, we could cut the time in half and do the 1 to 2 and everybody gets a nurse role. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Tell me more about this rule.
So in the WAC, it says, and it's new, it's in the new WAC, not in the original WAC, that to do the 1 to 2, all students during the simulation experience have to have an active role as the nurse. And they acknowledge the other roles are active, like an observer can be active, embedded participant can be active, but it has to be in their role as a nurse.
All right. I think we're doing okay with that. Because I've always wanted them all to be active.
Well, and we just naturally did that anyway. It's like everybody gets a chance, and doing the 2 nurses or 1 brain technique that has really, it lended itself that way. But now I'm like, no, we have, it's like, no, here's the WAC. You can't do this.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Awesome.
To your point, Susie, though, it also helps me from when I have like, for example, I have some skills lab faculty who want to kind of add a simulation within their their skills component time to actually apply things at the end of the quarter, which I think is great. And they're like, we're going to do 45 minutes and we have 20 students. And I'm like, so we're going to stop right there, because 45 minutes and 20 students does not allow for a meaningful experience at all. And like, if we're not going to commit to it, then we just can't, like, if we aren't all in, we're not in at all, kind of thing. And it's to that point, like, it's not 3 people are going to do the work and like 17 are going to watch, kind of thing. And even if we divide it into 2 rooms, which we have we have the team to be able to do it with our techs and our faculty, it's still not a meaningful experience to just, for some folks, not get that opportunity to like clinically think through something and to make decisions and to have those pivot points. And so that really also allows us to say, like, squeezing in 45 minutes does not a simulation make. This isn't something you just kind of throw in there because you think it would be nice for the learners. So as much as it makes it challenging for us and that we may need more time to be able to get everybody that opportunity, it also helps to protect us from we'll just tack it into like an existing time frame. What can you do in 45 minutes kind of thing?
Yeah. All right. I put the link to the forms in the chat, and I'm going to share my screen. And Andrea and Nicola, are you guys doing the next one?
I would love to partner if you're interested.
Yeah, I just emailed 2 suggestions. We'll see how long it takes to go through the ether. Let's see. They're just from SSH for February.
I'm not seeing them, but
Okay.
Did you put them in the chat?
Like, I can try. Can I attach to the chat?
I think so.
Uh,
I don't know.
File. Computer.
Yeah. It says file.
Open. There.
Perfect.
And emailing me here at the school, if it's not an email that has made it through our firewall, sometimes things get kicked. So I have to go through and approve them one by one. There.
I just put my email in the chat, and then that way if you want to first initiate a communication, then it will, when I send back a response, it should like allow it.
Yeah. We have a very, very proactive IT these days.
Yeah.
I think pretty much everybody does now.
Yeah. And then it changes every week.
Yeah.
So do you want me to attach these to the calendar invite then?
Yeah. I mean, if you guys like them, I think they're good.
I'm sure we'll like them.
Escape rooms are fun. We actually did one. We didn't do it completely simable, but we actually had one for a while. They are fun. The students like them. We didn't actually lock the door.
Right, so there's the QR code
Yeah.
for those who are listening to the recording, and it's the link is in the chat. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This has been really nice and informative, and it's good to see your faces again.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Oh, I know it, because it's starting to be time to schedule next quarter. And one of the problems with people who work here is a lot of people teach on Wednesdays, teach their theory classes on Wednesdays. So they're like, don't always have it on Wednesdays. Is there a, or Fridays? Is there a, another time? Does 8 o'clock in the morning work? Okay.
I think my next quarter is going to be, any day is going to be bad in the morning, but later might be okay. So I don't know if anybody else is willing to do anything later.
8 o'clock
But
kind of killed me this morning, I gotta say.
What did?
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It slightly killed me.
Most of my classes start at 8 o'clock, and I'll be doing that all quarter, next quarter, every day except Friday.
All right. We'll see what we can do. Thank you so much for an engaging discussion, and we'll do it again next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.